for one of us to be murdered by police brutality?
What if I was George Floyd?
If I was George Floyd?
What if I was George Floyd?
If I was George Floyd?
If I was George Floyd? If I was George Floyd?
The players say the NFL must condemn racism, admit it was wrong trying to silence their peaceful protests, and state that Black Lives Matter. Earlier in the day, the league put out that it has donated $44 million to hundreds of organizations combating racism and that it's committing an additional $20 million this year. The statement ending with, quote, "We stand with the black community because Black Lives Matter," unquote. To the NBA, now one step away from restarting its season, the league's Board of Governors approving yesterday to restart the season July 31st. 22 of the league's 30 teams would be involved. The NBA working with Disney to hold games in Orlando. A new champ would be crowned no later than October 12th. The Players Union still needs to approve the plan. They are reportedly set to vote today. Other sports making moves yesterday as well. The NFL announcing that coaches will be allowed to return to practice facilities starting today, though players still not allowed except for those rehabbing injuries. The NHL will follow suit on Monday, allowing up to 6 players plus a limited number of coaches to return to the facilities. The league saying games wouldn't start till at least July 1st. ESPN reporting that the WNBA considering playing a shortened season in Florida starting July 22nd. The WNBA had no comment. NASCAR announcing its summer schedule yesterday. 7 Cup Series races and the annual All-Star race as well, July 15th in Charlotte. Meanwhile, the sport that should be owning this time, summertime, baseball, still seemingly a long way away from a return. The Players Union rejecting the owner's latest proposal yesterday, Robin. Both sides back and forth over money for weeks. It does not seem they're getting any closer to a deal.
Huh. So these other sports kind of, you know, the wheels set in motion, but that one not quite as fast. All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it, Coy. All right. So let's talk about your emotions, how you process them, how you help your children process them right now with the tough news that's going on. You know what we have coming up? Iyanla of Iyanla Fix My Life. I am looking forward to be able to talk to her about what we should recognize about our own emotions or the stages of grief. Now, did you know also along that front, 2014 CNN hero Annette March Greers has a nonprofit that already has been helping some families deal with stages of grief.
Grief was already heightened with COVID-19. People lost jobs, family members, and then for the whole George Floyd incident to be witnessed nationally, this is now grief on top of grief.
No justice, no peace.
It is a very sad, scary, angry time. Not just African Americans, anyone who has a heart. The tears, the yelling, even the violent behavior, these are all grief reactions. Grief is messy. The grief of not having a safe community or to have your store looted, that's also grief. The way that we all can deal with grief constructively is to do something positive, to take action and protest peacefully, reaching out to help someone in need. Act upon your grief to make positive meaning so that you can deal with this in a healthy way.
Those are really helpful words, aren't they? To hear more, you can go to CNNHeroes.com.
CNN Heroes is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit Geico.com to see how much you could save.
Oh, we love our new home. Neighborhood's great.
Amazing school district. The HOA has been very involved.
These shrubs aren't board approved. You need to break down your cardboard.
Thank you.
Violation. Violation.
I see you met Cynthia.
At least Geico makes bundling our home and car insurance easy.
And does help us save a bunch of money.
2 inches over regulation.
Thanks, Cynthia.
For bundling made easy, go to Geico.com.
Want your brain better? Unlike ordinary memory supplements, Nariva has clinically proven ingredients that...
Mayor, unfortunately, we're having an auto problem. I can't...
Breast cancer as the first hormonal-based therapy. understanding of what the rule of law really means in this country. He has declared that he wants to be the president of law and order. But that's not what the declaration of this country is. If you go over to the Supreme Court, you see cut in stone. It is equal protection or equality under law, equality under law. So when he says law and order, he's missing something. The word justice has to be there. And that is what people of this country expect when they sign a contract with the U.S. government, that there will be laws, but there will be justice. And so law and order. I remember a professor of mine years ago saying, liberty without order is a mess, but order without liberty is a menace. And what I see taking place is the White House engaging in very menacing activity and leading us down the trail toward a dictatorship where it is only the law of rule, not the rule of law.
You led the Defense Department, of course. Tell us about the significance of a former Defense Secretary James Mattis, appointed by President Trump, describing the president as mocking the Constitution, but also the sitting Defense Secretary Mark Esper defying the president on his repeated desire to deploy active U.S. military in the U.S. The significance of that public disagreement?
Well, first of all, Jim Mattis, an extraordinary soldier, notwithstanding what the president is trying to demean him by saying he's vastly overrated. One of the most honored and decorated and most admired military men in our history. But the difficulty is, I think there's a code of honor that Jim Mattis and others have always followed, that the commander-in-chief, you serve under him and at his pleasure, and you do so until you receive an illegal order, clearly illegal order, or he does something which strikes at the core of your conscience. And at that point, you have a choice. You can continue to serve him or her or leave. And those are the choices made. Jim Mattis left. He said, I can't serve this any longer, consistent with my own conscience and my duty to my men and women in service. So those are the choices that the Secretary of Defense has.
And he did so voluntarily, although the president claimed falsely that he demanded his resignation. Interesting comments, notable, from Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski yesterday. She said this. She said, I felt like perhaps we're getting to a point where we can be more honest with the concerns we might hold internally and have the courage of our own convictions to speak up. She seemed to be referencing concerns among Republican lawmakers, private, not expressed publicly, about this president. Are those concerned Republican lawmakers, in your view, failing their duty, their country, if they're keeping such serious concerns to themselves?
I think there is a dereliction of duty across the board. H.R. McMaster wrote a book back when I was at the Pentagon, and all of us read it, namely that you should never allow the military to become used by politicians for a political objective. And when I signed on with President Clinton, I had an agreement with him. I said, I will do my very best to carry out the duties of this office, and I expect you will never ask me to participate in a political decision or a political activity. He said, absolutely. And so to see the military being used for a political purpose, it seems to me that undercuts the very notion that we have a military subservient or subordinate to the commander-in-chief, but the commander-in-chief cannot and should not politicize our military. It is the last institution I'm aware of that he hasn't been able to politicize successfully. He's politicized the Justice Department. He's tried to politicize the judiciary, my judges, my generals, my attorney general. And so now it's my military. It's not. It's not his military. It's the American people's military. And we are sworn to defend the Constitution, not to defend his office. So I find it very offensive that he would use our military to fire rubber bullets or mace or other pepper spray into the eye of innocent people in order to get a photo op. That's not a commander-in-chief. That's a dictator-in-chief.
Retired four-star Marine General John Allen wrote about the president's threat of military force. He said, quote, it may well signal the beginning of the end of the American experiment. That is quite a jarring statement. And I wonder, given also your concerns about racial division in this country, as demonstrated by Ahmaud Arbery's death, is that how serious the situation is for this country right now?
I think it is serious. I think we are at that tipping point. A former Supreme Court Justice, Brandeis, said that when government becomes a lawbreaker, it breeds contempt for the law. It invites every man to become a law unto himself. It invites anarchy. And so we can't afford to have the government become a lawbreaker. The police who executed George Floyd, Mr. Arbery, those were basically lynchings. Now, my wife 15 years ago was very much involved in going to the United States Senate and begging them, along with her friends, to say, pass a resolution apologizing for the United States Senate failing to condemn lynching, failing to pass laws that prevent lynching. You know what? The Republican majority at that time said, okay, only by a voice vote, only on Monday night. So the members who didn't want to go on record as being opposed to lynching didn't have to be seen. And here we are today, the Senate debating, making lynching a federal crime, and one senator saying, no, it goes too far. These were lynchings that took place in Minneapolis and in Georgia. And we ought to stand up and condemn them, because that is a case of extrajudicial killing. That is murder. Those were lynchings. And the Senate ought to be ashamed if it doesn't pass this law making it a crime.
I should remind our viewers, as they're listening to you, that you were a former Republican senator yourself. Secretary Cohen, thanks very much.
Well, a stunning jobs report, jobs coming back, but not for everyone. The racial disparities in these numbers clear. We'll talk about it ahead.
25 minutes from now, we will have more on the jobs report coming up. Peter Navarro will be joining us in the 10 o'clock hour, Assistant to the President and Director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy. We'll get his reaction to that next hour, as well as the President, top of the hour.
All right, we're watching that. Also, this Fox News alert, U.S. Navy vet Michael White back on American soil. Iran releasing the California native after holding him for nearly 2 years.
I'm improving. I did contract coronavirus at the Mashhad Central Prison prior to going on furlough, but I'm recovering pretty decently, getting back in shape. I was really in poor shape then, but getting a lot better as a result of Swiss Embassy and all the efforts of the Trump administration.
He has obviously been through a lot, but looking good right there. Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon with the details. Jennifer, good morning.
You know, there were bat-wielding folks down there. There were people that were sending racial slurs down in Fishtown. But there were also people from the community that stood right in front of our bookshop and said, like, no more, right? It won't happen here. As did I. I slept at the bookshop several nights this week to make sure that, you know, our presence was known.
Janine, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
I want to bring a man who wants to create major policy change, who sees this economic inequality divide, sees how Black America is left out of prospering, and he's trying to change it. Joining me now, John Hope Bryant. He's the CEO and founder of Operation Hope, a group that works to equip low-income youth and adults with the financial tools and education to lead better, stronger lives. John, tell us what you've seen in the last week.
Well, first of all, Stephanie, I've seen somebody who's quite inspiring. The young lady who's just on your program, I wanted her to call me. We're going to give her free financial coaching and counseling to renegotiate her bills. I want to make sure we give her a mini grant from Operation Hope and make sure she gets all the stuff she qualifies for, including earning some tax credit. And I want to buy some books to make sure she's all. That's what all of us can do. I've seen, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, continue.
I've seen sadness this week because it reminds me of the Rodney King riot, where Operation Hope was born. And it reminds me of the Watts riot after Dr. King's assassination. But we can't handle another one of these. This is it. This is our last chance to get it right in America. And we can get it right. We're just not doing the right thing. Even these unemployment numbers today are a bit of a ghost. This is boosted by PPP. This is the effect of PPP. By the way, thankfully, the Republicans and Democrats worked together on this, and the White House got their act together, and we did it. But that's PPP, temporary unemployment. We still have 17% of blacks and Latinos unemployed. We're seeing the people who are marching, blacks, Latinos, young people and women are the ones who are getting hurt the most. This temporary lift based on stimulus. We still have structural challenges where George Floyd was murdered. is a 570 credit score step. You heard me say 700 credit score neighborhoods don't riot. They go shopping. It's a 570 credit score. That's where you have all check cashers and payday loan lenders and rental home stores and title lenders and liquor stores and no job. And it's a 70%, 69% to be specific, liquid poverty rate where George Floyd was murdered. It's a 35% poverty rate, beyond the liquid poverty rate. The unbanked rate is close to 30%. It's like a third world country. How do we expect something positive to come out of that situation? It's not good for America. And I'm not talking about black people here. I'm talking about poor whites in rural America. I'm talking about struggling middle-class people who are watching your program saying, I've got too much money at the end of my money, and I don't see my life advancing or changing for myself or my children. We need a new Marshall Plan for a new America, a renewed America that gives us more GDP and more jobs. That's what you start with bullet as a job.
John, you've got a new Marshall Plan. You've written it yourself. It's rooted in education. Tell us about it.
Yes, ignorance and racism is in part banished by education and exposure. You cannot segregate your heart and integrate your pocket. Anybody with common sense knows that. But you cannot have a 12th grade educated America expect to have, enlightened thought processes across this country, being left by the rest of the world. You need education for all, K through college, right? And this is part of how we make it right for African Americans after 400 years of being oppressed, is give them education that gives them uplift, no one can take away from them. Financial literacy for all. Most importantly, Stephanie, a living wage for all. Not on the back of small businesses, like the one you just saw. Not on the back of even corporations. It's borne by all of us, because all of us would get a bonus just like Wall Street gets. You get your pay every week, and then you work hard, play by the rules, did the right thing with an able-bodied American. You work, you get a bonus at the end of the year of 20%, 25% of your pay, which gets you into a true living wage. We're going to put 70% of that back in the economy anyway, so the investor class is going to win. And EITC is something that's shared by all Americans because all America benefits from it. And it would cost almost nothing. In fact, it wouldn't cost, it would add because it's an investment. We've just been looking at all this the wrong way. We need venture capital for small business and entrepreneurs in these neighborhoods. You come back from prison, what job are you going to get? But these drug dealers, yeah, they're immoral and unethical, but they're not dumb stuff. They understand import, export, finance, marketing, wholesale, retail, customer service, security, territory, logistics. They just have bad role models in a bad environment. Could they be entrepreneurs? I think that there's a holistic agenda here, right? Where you take those who are invisible and you make them productive participants in the American dream. You give them a stake. You take middle class and you strengthen it. So the color's not black or white anymore, Stephanie, it's green. And this Marshall Plan is long overdue. We did this after World War II, as you well know. We gave every returning GI as much education as they could shove down their throat, a mortgage to buy a home, which was the start of their net worth, and the apprenticeship for a job for the future. Where's our apprenticeships? So part of this, apprenticeships for all, and tax incentives for corporations to do it, because 90% of our jobs come from private sector. Internships for all, right? What hope do the people protesting have, really? Because George Floyd's problem really was proper. Yes, it's injustice. Yes, it's police brutality. In some cases, we're dealing with that. There's a lot of good officers. But in this case, it was just murder. But they don't see him as the user of anything. He's just somebody that they can abuse and nobody would
John, those are big picture sweeping changes. Let's get to the immediate. The last 10 weeks, while we've been shut down, while we've been quarantined, that investor class you're talking about, many of which can work from home, often can work from their vacation homes where they can have food delivered. But for poor America, what has COVID been like, even for those who aren't sick?
Oh, this is the first responders have been black and brown. Those who are were dying at a higher rate, a double of the national average of black and brown people, African Americans. This has been like a black swan for black Americans. We're dying at a higher rate through something. In part to our slave diet, 40 years ago, they gave us all food they didn't want. So we have hypertension and diabetes and too much salt and all this stuff, which is now making making us, put us in an immune system deficiency for something that attacks your immune system. We are not distancing because we live in urban ghettos and urban neighborhoods where you're on top of each other. So how do you distance? And many people in a house. We have jobs like delivery people, stock clerks, people working at Amazon, all these different places where we're actually serving the people like you and me who are actually able to sit at home because we're part of an investor class. And you have a bifurcated economy. You've got a soft recovery at the top that's going to happen in the third and fourth quarter of educated people and those in the investor class. We're probably in the $100,000 a year and up, right? And then you're going to have who had $4 trillion of stimulus poured into them. And you're going to have an L at the bottom, which is the 40% of America who's working hourly jobs, high school education of all races, who this recession will feel like a depression. So we have black folks that we've been doing so much with so little for so long. We can almost do anything with nothing. But this is a bit too much. And then you have these murders by officers sworn to protect on top of this. And you know, when Make Sure America has a headache, black folks have pneumonia. Yes, we are all sick, but it just feels much worse when you are in this skin. And I've got the benefit that others don't have. And I recognize that. I can talk to you. I can go to the White House. I can talk to Wall Street. But if you don't have a voice, the young person told me this week in session, I don't have a voice. My daddy didn't have a voice. My grandfather didn't have a voice. The only time anybody listens to us is when we rattle cages and tear stuff up and protest and unfortunately riot. John, you have a voice. Others have go in and use this moment to use our voice to cut a deal, to get us jobs and opportunity, to access to wealth. No one wants a handout, Stephanie. They want a hand up. They don't know how. The ladder is broken. There's no place to grab. And what I love about what you're doing is you're bringing America together in a unified vision and figuring out what we are for. Or to quote Dr. King's last book, where do we go from here?
Well, John, you have a voice, and I'm so glad that you're using it. Thank you so much for joining me, John Hope Bryant. And any minute now, President Trump will be speaking after that surprising jobs report. We're going to bring that to you live. But first, NFL star Drew Brees apologizing again after his comments about taking a knee during the national anthem. Mike Tirico from NBC Sports joins me on that and how George Floyd's death will have an impact long after the protests are over. As our live coverage continues from the city of brotherly love. That's right, we are in Philly. Stick around.
Business leaders respond?
Empathy, transparency, and agility, I think, are going to be absolute paramount skills.
Don't just think about how do we reopen
situations and reduce their forces, maybe not massively, but reduce them and de-escalate. Your thoughts quickly about reform.
If you want to talk about reform, bring the Los Angeles Police Protective League to the table, because the Los Angeles Police Department should be the beacon on the hill, because we have already implemented all of these things. So take our example and let us lead from the front.
All right, Rob Harris on the ground there in Los Angeles for us. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Sandra.
As we've been mentioning, we are awaiting the president. He is expected to speak at the top of the hour about those brand new jobs numbers out this morning. We'll take you to him and the White House as soon as he begins. That'll be from the...
Come on. No.
And that is the biggest monthly increase ever. The unemployment, while still in the double digits, fell from 14.7% to 13.3% last month. MSNBC anchor David Gura is with me, and we're also joined by NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece. David, let me begin with you. We spoke 24 hours ago. We were talking about these numbers and where we were expecting them to land. Obviously, the numbers this morning better than expected.
Better than expected, and I think surprising to a lot of people, including a lot of the best economists in this country. There was the expectation here we're going to see a loss of about 8 million jobs in this country over the last month. And indeed, as you say, we see this gain of 2.5 million jobs, Eamon. So this is unexpected. It's not typical. And I want to just go back to where we were about 11 weeks ago when all of this began. There was a recognition among economists that this is not a typical recession. We weren't headed for a typical recession, and we haven't been in a typical recession. And if you comb through this report that we got from the Labor Department today, there's an acknowledgement of that. The methodologies had to have been adjusted here. The modelings had to have been adjusted just a little bit, trying to figure out how to do the work of the Labor Department using all these statistics, making sense of all these statistics in this unprecedented time. And we do note that the response to the survey, part of this is based on survey data, has been lower than it was. But putting all of that aside, if you look at these data, what they confirm is what policymakers wanted, what economists thought might happen here. That is, folks who were laid off would maintain ties to their employers, and those employers, when they were able to do so because of stimulus or because of the environment they're in improving somewhat, have been able to bring them back into the fold. Indeed, when you look at sort of how this breaks down by sector, you see gains in this report in the leisure sector, among restaurants, for instance, and that gives some people hope that that's what we saw here over the course of the last month, that folks who were laid off were brought back to their employers as a result of them feeling more confident about their position, them using some of that stimulus money that I mentioned. But what I'll say lastly here, Eamon, is the fundamentals of the economy are the same. We were in a very deep hole.
You and Ed were pointing out an awful lot of misery behind those numbers, but to have jobs added and the unemployment rate go down when everybody thought it was going to be jobs lost and the unemployment rate go up, I think it shows two things. First of all, the resilience of the American economy and the political resilience of President Trump, because, you know, I can understand why he's going to hold a news conference in a couple of moments about all this. He has had a brutal week with being criticized by a lot of people in the country, religious leaders, military leaders, even a few Republicans, and he's going to be able to come out this morning and say, you know, the transition to greatness, which is what he is calling the reopening of the country, that we are seeing the first signs of it. So good news for the American economy, good news politically for Donald Trump when he needs it.
Yeah, and Chris, to your point, before the civil unrest in this country, the president had been talking about, look, as coronavirus was the focus, I built the greatest economy the world's ever seen. I'm the one in this presidential election year, obviously it's the backdrop, who can rebuild it. And there were a lot of fears just a few weeks ago that as Georgia, remember when Georgia was the outlier, even the president said he wasn't happy with the Republican governor. There was a concern about a new spike of cases that maybe some states were moving too fast. It seems like this jobs report, and again, you're right, we've got to caveat it, you don't want to overstate it, but some optimism out there about not just states, but people bouncing back in this country.
Yeah, and it's so interesting.
And that interview was just hours after George Floyd's memorial service played out here in Minneapolis, where we did hear from those who loved George and, of course, learn more about the legacy he is now leaving behind, the first of what is set to be a series of goodbyes, culminating in a funeral early next week. Poppy, Jim?
Omar Jimenez in Minneapolis, thank you. More now on another city. 2 Buffalo police officers have been suspended without pay after shoving a 75-year-old man to the ground. CNN's Alexandra Field, she's been following this story. And Alex, notable here, police initially said he tripped. The video, of course, contradicts that. Walk us through it.
Yeah, shocking because the video does show exactly what happened, but a spokesperson for the city is saying that initially they saw just one video, now other videos have come to light. The mayor came forward. He made a statement saying that the video was deeply disturbing and that the police commissioner has suspended without pay these 2 officers and launched an investigation. But you've got to watch this video. It is clear to your eyes and to mine what we are seeing. A 75-year-old man walks up to a crowd of officers. He is then knocked to the ground by 2 of those officers. Blood comes gushing from his ear, and no one gets down to help him. New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo also reacting with this tweet saying the incident is wholly unjustified and utterly disgraceful. I've spoken with Buffalo Mayor Byron Brown, and we agree that the officers involved should be immediately suspended pending a formal investigation. Police officers must enforce, not abuse the law. Again, that investigation is now underway. The 75-year-old man who you saw knocked to the street there, he is in a hospital said to be in serious but stable condition. Jim?
Wow. It's so hard to watch, and I've seen it so many times this morning. Alex, thank you very much. Now to Tacoma, Washington, the mayor there calling for the firing and the prosecution of 4 police officers after the death of a man in custody.
33-year-old Manuel Ellis died on March 3rd at the hands of police. His death has now been ruled a homicide. CNN's Dan Simon joins us now. Dan, a case perhaps many of our viewers not familiar with, the mayor reacting to new video that surfaced in this case. What is it telling us?
That's right, Poppy Jim. Here you have a new name on the list of African Americans who died while in police custody, and as you said, his name is Manuel Ellis, 33 years old, and according to a medical examiner's report, he died due to physical restraint. In short, he died due to a lack of oxygen, which of course echoes what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis. Now, in the wake of all this, a new video has emerged that CNN is aware of. We're trying to get more details about it, but it purportedly shows at least one officer aggressively dealing with Ellis. We are told that Ellis was trying to break into some cars while people were in those vehicles, and when police caught up with him, he was aggressive, according to police, and they had to physically restrain him. Now this video, again, purportedly shows at least one officer aggressively punching Ellis, and in the wake of all this, the mayor is saying that all 4 officers involved should be fired. This is what the mayor had to say.
The officer's actions we saw on this video tonight only confirm that Manuel Ellis's death was a homicide. The officers who committed this crime should be fired and prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Now we should point out that of the 4 officers involved, 2 of them are white, 1 is black, and a 4th is Asian. The mayor of Tacoma again saying that all 4 should be fired. Washington Governor Jay Inslee says that there should be a complete and full investigation here. But the bottom line, Poppy, is that you have yet another case, another name on that list of African Americans who died just after being taken into custody by police. Poppy.
Dan, thank you for bringing that to more national attention. Joining me now to discuss is Marilyn Mosby, State's Attorney for the City of Baltimore. It is very, very good to have you on all of this. I was going to start out asking something else, but having seen all of this reporting just now and what Dan Simon just brought, you know, it just reminds me of what Will Smith said, right? And I'm paraphrasing here, but racism isn't new. It's just getting filmed, right? It's not happening more. It's just getting filmed more.
You're absolutely right. I mean, when you think about these types of encounters, this has been happening since the inception of slavery. Police have been the enforcers of a criminal justice system that has disparately impacted black people in this country, from the slave codes to the civil rights movement to Jim Crow to the war on drugs. I mean, and what we are seeing is a frustration, a manifestation of frustration and anguish and anger, and just quite candidly, people are fed up.
You write eloquently about, obviously, you know, for people who aren't aware, you brought charges against the 6 officers in the death of Freddie Gray, and they were not convicted. But you wrote something to try to remind people that there is hope. Those who see so many officers being charged but not convicted, and that is that your office convicted 21 police officers since the death of Freddie Gray.
Yes, I mean, when you look at what happened in 2015, that accountability ultimately led to exposure. A week after I charged those officers, the Department of Justice came in, exposed the discriminatory policing practices of the 8th largest police department in the country. That exposure ultimately led to reform. We have tangible reforms, use of force, de-escalation policies in the city of Baltimore, where the officers, even an affirmative responsibility where if somebody steps out of line, they must intervene. There are tangible reforms, but there are also systems that are set up that go outside of the courtroom that stop a police accountability, and that we really have to discuss. The fact that we don't have independent investigations when it comes to these types of offenses. I can tell you that in the Freddie Gray case, the police department were working against us. Search and seizure warrants weren't executed. Witnesses were, the most pertinent questions weren't asked. There were witnesses to the case where they were actually then assigned to investigate the case, right? So you need that independence. When we talk about police departments circumventing the communities in which they serve because they feel that they're going to get more deferential treatment from judges. The police officers in the Freddie Gray case, you know, the first officer we tried was in front of a jury. They were hung. Then it was tried in front of a judge, and 3 of them were acquitted.
a bench trial. Just on that point, sorry to step on that, go ahead.
No, I just, there are a lot of systematic sort of changes that we have to put into place. As you all were just discussing, the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights and these contractual employment contracts that tie the police department's hands when you have problematic officers. This particular officer had 18 internal affairs complaints, which is foreseeable that he would be a problem. These are the systems.
You know, our colleague Jeffrey Toobin has brought up the, oh, did we lose her? Okay, that's too bad. They'll try to get her back. If we can't, we'll have her back soon. That was Marilyn Mosley, State's Attorney for Baltimore City. We thank her. Jim.
An important conversation, no question. Well, what will Washington, what will Congress do to stop police brutality?
There's no income verification. No.
George Floyd's death is obviously a tragedy. I think the City Council, I think, has the right to look into this. I think everybody needs to kind of hit the brakes and kind of slow down. I don't know if this is the right thing, but they have the right to look into it and make changes. And we obviously know that there has to be changes made. Policing across the country needs to change. We need to do a better job of supporting our communities of color and doing a better job of making sure we treat everybody better with more respect. But I don't know what's going to happen with the city. I think this is a territory, so I'll be looking like at the conference like everybody else today, and I'm interested to see what happens.
Let me, sir, get your thoughts about a comment made by Minnesota's Attorney General Keith Ellison. He was on Morning Joe on this network earlier in the morning. He talked about the challenge of making the case to a jury that's traditionally conditioned to believe the police. Take a listen.
In so many cases, whether it is starting with Rodney King, Walter Scott, so many other cases, Trayvon Martin, which was not a police case, but is a quasi-police case. You know, the defense attorneys were able to break one link of the prosecutorial chain, and the jury bought it. The fact is that nobody's above the law, nobody's beneath the law, and we got to make sure that this case is tight at every single link in that chain.
Your reactions to that, sir? Do you think he is right?
Well, I think I support the honest examination of not only Minneapolis Police Department, but the policing profession in general. Law enforcement leaders in Minnesota and across the country and need to understand how to better serve the communities. You know, as far as what he said, you know, there's a lot more to examine on there. As far as I can say, that we are open to examination of how we do law enforcement in this country, and especially here in Minnesota. And that's kind of what my views on that are.
We obviously also know that there were the charges against the other officers. In fact, 2 of the 3 ex-police officers who were in court yesterday are rookie cops on the beat. One claiming that he told Derek Chauvin, you shouldn't do this. The other allegedly said, shall we roll him over? And if that's true and Chauvin didn't respond to them, what does their police training tell them to do? Shed some light on what the actual manual is supposed to get these officers to have done.
Yeah, each department's different, but again, that's why we need to change. So every officer needs to be accountable for not only themselves, but for their fellow officers. So here at Hampton County Sheriff's Office, it's different than Minneapolis. If we, if one of our coworkers is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, our rules and our policy says, hey, you know, you tap them out and say, hey, we'll take care of it, get out of here. Because we have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to hold our peers accountable. Because again, we have to be accountable to the community and our constituents and our people and our taxpayers. So our policy is, if you see something, one of our deputies doing something that's incorrect, violating policy or violating moral commands, is get them out of the room, get them out of the situation. In this case, I think that should have happened. There could be some cultural issues or different cultural that they need to change in that issue in that department. I wasn't there, but I think they need to make sure that any officer, regardless of time on, rookie or not, that if you see something, you have to be able to step in and say, hey, we got this, we'll take a break.
Let me ask you, sir, finally, I'm sure you've seen some of the images across the country, including that in your state. Have you been satisfied with the response of law enforcement towards these protests? Because we've seen some very disturbing images, and I'm curious to get your thoughts generally about how the police has been responding to what is overwhelmingly peaceful protests taking place in your state, in your city, and in this country?
You know, I think hindsight's always 20/20. We wish we could have done a better job. Minneapolis wishes they could have done a better job in the beginning. We're not perfect. I think early on they should have asked for help from outside agencies like Hennepin County and the state. As far as peaceful protests, we allow them to exercise their rights for free speech. I think the only thing I would have done different is calling for additional support in the beginning, because, you know, safety in numbers, we could have had a situation controlled early on. I don't think it would have escalated. Again, our job is to make sure people are safe. They have the right to express themselves, but do it in a safe manner. And a safe manner is not burning down buildings or getting people hurt or taking away people's livelihood or their businesses. Because a lot of those businesses on Lake Street are immigrant-owned and people of color, and they lost their livelihood now, especially since the COVID crisis. So I think resources were not as much as we wish, but if we could have gone back in time, of course we would change things. We would have a better job of controlling it and a better job of making sure people are safe.
All right, Hennepin County, Minnesota Sheriff David Hutchinson, sir, thank you very much for joining us this morning. I appreciate your time. Still to come, police versus protesters. New York City's top cop said.
We have Fox Team coverage. William LaJeunesse is standing by with a look at the protest nationwide. But we begin with Matt Finn. He is live again in Minneapolis. Matt, good morning.
Good morning, Ed. Within the hour, Minneapolis City Council is scheduled to hold an emergency meeting where it's expected to vote yes on new immediate accountability measures on police here and perhaps begin that shift towards dismantling the police department. The city of Minneapolis has been embroiled in an intense philosophical battle over police for quite some time. At least 3 city council members, including the council president, now support dismantling the police department, with many suggestions and ideas floating around, including shifting funds away from police and towards community programs like juvenile crime prevention, and relying more on city resources, calling 311 instead of 911. Councilmember Jeremiah Ellison tweeted yesterday, quote, "We are going to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, and when we're done, we're not simply going to glue it back together. We are going to dramatically rethink how we approach public safety and emergency response. It's really past due."
We'll be working to move work and funds away from the police department to alternative structures and investments in community safety and community development.
Today's council meeting comes after a memorial service yesterday for George Floyd here in Minneapolis. Reverend Al Sharpton gave the eulogy. Celebrities like Kevin Hart attended. The Floyd family shared some lighthearted memories.
George was somebody who was always welcoming. Everybody would feel like they were special. He would embrace them.
He would stand up for his family and friends. He would stand up for any injustice everywhere. Can y'all please say his name? Thank y'all.
And Minnesota's governor is scheduled to be touring some of the damage right now, and we witnessed a lot of it. We saw businesses burn right to the ground. It's very disheartening, and there is immense damage across this city. Ed.
That's just horrific. Looks calm now, though. Matt Finn, thank you. Sandra?
Yeah.
Okay, meanwhile, more massive and mostly peaceful protests were held in major cities across the country.
In Georgia, of also engaging in a cover-up. This as prosecutors say that Arbery was chased, hunted, and gunned down. And wait until you hear what was alleged to have been said right after he was killed. We'll have that update next.
I just love hitting the open road.
Live from Santa Monica, California this morning. Hey, William.
Well, Sandra, both police and prosecutors are now under scrutiny. These stores in Santa Monica were among the first looted on Sunday, and now police are asking for demonstrators' help to catch those who hijack their voice by uploading cell phone pictures. You don't give a name or an address, but a telephone number to help prosecutors substantiate that evidence in court. And even though the troublemakers wore masks and hoodies and concealed their license plates, police can ID suspects using certain software. news and store surveillance videos and cell phone location data. But it's a two-way street. Police are also under scrutiny. 2 LA officers on the sidelines now pending review for their use of force using batons. Also the same in Long Beach. A photo posted of an officer standing over a pool of blood, again with his baton. In Florida, a deputy under review for breaking the window of a motorist who blocked a roadway and refused to get out of her car.
You had to break my window, really?
You rolled my arm up in your window.
Because I felt unsafe.
Well,
you guys are killing people like me.
I do find the video very troubling, and that's why I have opened up an inquiry into the entire incident.
And near San Diego, police released video of a black man surrounded by officers who was handcuffed without provocation and charged for resisting arrest.
Why am I still here? I don't got nothing on me. I'm doing nothing wrong. I'm being a citizen.
We're waiting
so you know
for
what I'm saying? That's why I'm frustrated. It's hot as hell. I'm sitting outside for no reason.
I get it.
You know what I'm saying?
I understand.
You really don't get it though. You don't get it. It's
I
cool.
understand that you're frustrated.
I feel like I understand you're being empathetic, and I appreciate that. You know what I'm saying? But you don't get it, bro.
So the point is, Sandra, right now you're seeing a remarkable shift in policy. Basically, it's probably policing in the digital age, but you have LAPD asking for evidence of excessive use of force. Sandra?
William Lajeunesse on the ground there in Santa Monica, California. Thank you.
All right, Fox News alert right now. You can see this shot of the White House. We're waiting for a news conference with the president to start shortly.
Doing really well. Vaccines, by the way, had a meeting yesterday on vaccines. We're doing incredibly well with that. I think you're going to have some very positive surprises. Today on vaccines, we're doing incredibly well with that. I think you're going to have some
investigating as a hate crime.
Tremendous progress is being made on vaccines. In fact, we have ready to go in terms of transportation and legit, and Mike and the task force and all of the people, the admiral, the general. They were saying, oh, you should use admirals. I said, I did. You should use generals. I said, I did. Used them both. We had some incredible people on the task force. The job they did in getting ventilators built by the thousands, we're giving to Nigeria, to France, to Spain, to Italy, to many, many countries, to UK. They're having a hard time. We're giving them ventilators. It's a great thing. I mean, they're very hard to make. They're long-term items. We mobilized. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. Just like the Second World War. There hasn't been a mobilization like this since the Second World War, especially ventilators, because it's hard. It's big, it's complex, very complex machinery, computerized all over the place, and very expensive. And we're building thousands a week. Right now, we're building thousands a week. We have all we can use. No governor, you hear the calls, you listen in on those calls. Frankly, you're invited to if you want, but you do anyway, even if you're not invited. And you see what's going on. Every governor, there's not been one patient in this entire massive country, and we didn't have ventilators when we started. The cupboards were empty. The previous administration left us empty cupboards. There isn't one patient, not one, that needed a ventilator that didn't get one. Think of that. And we're talking about millions of people, big country, millions of people. Not one person needed a ventilator that didn't get it. So we want the continued blanket lockdown to end for the states. We may have some embers or some ashes, or we may have some flames coming, but we'll put them out. We'll stomp them out. We understand this now. We'll stomp them out, and we'll stomp them out very, very powerfully. So we've made a big step in our comeback. This was always going to be...
The U.S. economy added 2.5 million jobs in May. The unemployment rate dropped.
There was hiring in bars and restaurants and on construction sites. That depression level on...
Whether this is a hurricane that we recover from very quickly, we recover from in a matter of weeks or days. And we've learned. Again, as good as these numbers are, the best numbers are still closed or very partially closed. Very few actually are fully open. These numbers are with states, 50 states, and very few are fully opened. Even the ones that are very out there are not fully opened. So we're going to have some tremendous numbers coming in, when you look at the ridership in the airlines, what they've gone, they went from 2% to a number that, if it's correct, I'd be surprised actually, but it's a very high number. It's great. People are traveling, and you know what? They're traveling in the United States, and they're also driving, and they're building the trailers. They're building a lot of things. They're driving. People are driving. I may have to buy one of those things, drive around town. Maybe I'll drive back to New York with our First Lady in a trailer. What do they call that? An RV. An RV. Well, you should know Indiana's the capital of RVs. I think I'm going to buy an RV and travel for an hour in an RV with our First Lady. I don't think anybody would mind that. So we've come together. We're coming together. We've never had a thing happen like this. We were all, including the media, we were all in uncharted territory. We were uncharted. It never happened before. Nobody knew. I couldn't be sure. I felt it. I felt we were very powerful to come back.
Amazing the difference a few days can make. Stephanie Rowe, the president, he praised the
Minneapolis. Omar, let us start with you. A very moving ceremony yesterday. The city council.
You have this incredible, unbelievable country that's never done better, and you want us to close it down? I can't do that. What are you talking about? And after listening for 10 minutes, didn't take long, I said, I think we have to close it down. Because of the contagion and because of the power it had with especially certain people. Now, we didn't know the second part. We knew it was highly contagious because it spread like fire. But we didn't know that it hit certain groups of people. That helps us so much in testing and other things. So we're going to protect our elderly. We're going to protect especially our elderly with problems, whether it's heart or diabetes or any problem. It's like a magnet. I mean, you're elderly and you have diabetes or you have a bad heart.
In your head, you imagine what struggling to breathe was just incredibly powerful there. Now, again, almost 2 weeks after, we are still learning more about the moments leading up to what we saw play out on that cell phone video. We're hearing from a man who was in the car with George Floyd in the moment.
I don't know what does. The president is someone who, as a businessman, went bankrupt over 4 times. Warren Buffett's one of the greatest American investors. Warren Buffett did.
I said a long time ago, I said by the end of the year, I think it's going to be a lot sooner than that. And you know, just in finishing about vaccines, we have mobilized the logistics arm of our military. We can move hundreds of thousands of men and women in a very short time. The vaccine is easy by comparison, but we can move hundreds of thousands. It's meant for war. It's not meant for this, but we have our war with the invisible enemy. It's meant for war, but we can move hundreds of thousands. Think of that. Hundreds of thousands in a very short time. The same people are doing the vaccine, and they're fully mobilized. So now I'm going to sign legislation to make important changes to the PPP that will especially help restaurants, hotels, and other businesses that have been very hard hit by the virus. This is going to make it 24 months, and I think you know the legislation as well as I do. I want to thank the Democrats. We had essentially unanimous votes, I think, in the Senate and the House, right? Whether it's unanimous or very close, it's a lot of people. But I want to thank the Democrats who worked together on it great. And I hope we can get along with the Democrats. It's been a disaster in terms of relationship. But I hope we can get along because it's a great thing for our country. We did all of these numbers and all of this greatness. We have the greatest economy we've ever had. It will soon be greater than it was even before. We did this with discord. We did this with a Senate and a House that were not dealing with us, and we weren't dealing with them either. The level of let's just say the warlike posture is ridiculous because we have a great country. It would make a difference if we could get along, and maybe we can and maybe we can't. I mean, there are a lot of differences. We want low taxes, we want closed borders, we want people to come in, but they have to come in through merit. They want open borders. You can't have open borders, especially now when you have a pandemic. We set a record, by the way.
Chauvin's seniority as compared to some of these other clients. We know 2 of these officers were very new, a junior in rank, and so they're trying to distinguish between.
He feels is a positive story to tell about his coronavirus response when he goes to Puritan Medical Products, this facility that
people aren't penetrating. This is a very, very powerful wall. Going to be up there a long time, and it's saved us a lot of anguish and grief, but you don't hear about that. One of the hardest things I've ever had to do is get the money necessary, which is billions of dollars, from a party that was totally opposed to it. They gave me other things. The military we could rebuild wasn't easy in terms of that. That's not their natural instinct. But for the wall, no, can't have it, can't have it, can't have it. We had 9 court cases on the. If you don't have borders, you don't have a country. So we have a lot of things to work with the Democrats. If we could work along with them, it would be great. If we don't, we're going to do great as a country anyway. We're going to do great anyway. But if we could work along with the Democrats, and I'm open to it. People say I wouldn't be open. Why would I be open? They did things that they should have never done. And you know what I'm talking about. Should have never done. But I'm totally open to it. But we could go even steps further. But it's already been historic. Nobody has done more in 3.5 years than this administration has done. Nobody has come close to doing the things we've done. We've rebuilt our military. We've cut regulations at a level that nobody's even come close to. And that's whether it's 4 years, 8 years, or in one case, even more than that. Nobody's done anything close. Regulations, low taxes, rebuilt military, take care of our vets. We got choice approved for the vets. So instead of waiting online for 4 weeks to see a doctor, they can go immediately outside, get a private doctor, we pay for the bill, and the vet is in great shape. And we actually save money, but more importantly, we save their lives, and we save the quality of their life. They were dying. They would come onto a line, they'd have to wait 4 or 5 weeks, they wouldn't be very sick. By the time they see the doctor, they'd be terminally ill. We don't have that anymore. You don't hear any bad stories about the vets anymore. That doesn't mean go out and find them, because tonight you'll be traveling all over the world looking for an unhappy vet. And we got accountability because we had a lot of bad people in the VA. It's called VA accountability, where we can now fire people that don't treat our vets good. We have sadists, we have thieves, we have a lot of bad people. And we can now, it's called VA accountability. Almost 50 years they've been trying to get it. Choice. Almost 50 years they've been trying to get it. For many, many years. I've been hearing about it for years. They've been trying to get VA choice. Choice means you can have a choice of it.
That does not help the situation, to say the least. Alexander, thank you so much. We'll stay on top of that story. CNN and Sesame Street joining forces again, this time to talk to your kids about racism. The nationwide protest.
We've had a great morning. This is just the beginning. It's going to be incredible. I'm going to sign our very important...
reads, "I can breathe now," and it has Mr. Floyd's face on it. So these protests continue here, but they've definitely taken on a different tone.
Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon. I'd like to sign this bill. This is a very different thing. And by the way, what's happened to our country and what you now see, it's been happening, is the greatest thing that can happen for race relations, for the African American community, for the Asian American, for the Hispanic American community, for women, for everything.
What's your plan?
Because our country is so strong, and that's what my plan is. We're going to have the strongest economy in the world. We almost are there now. We had the strongest economy anywhere in the world, and now we're going to have an economy that's even stronger.
Sir, how would a better economy...
I'd like to sign this.
Yeah, just to follow up, how would a better economy have protected George Floyd? Sure, I'll ask after. Will you take questions after, sir?
Black unemployment went up by 0.1%. Asian Americans unemployment went up by 0.5%. How is that a victory?
You are something.
How is that a victory?
Thank you very much. Achievement. Feel so good about it. This is just the beginning. The best is yet to come. Mike, would you say a few words?
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and today's a great day for America. The American comeback begins today. And, Mr. President, it is a tribute to the strong decisions that you made early on to put the health of America first. From suspending all travel from China, calling on the American people to embrace the kind of mitigation practices, to practice social distancing, to endure 45 days to slow the spread. the way you worked in a bipartisan way. We want to thank members of both parties in the Congress for working with us to provide relief for families, small businesses, and enterprises across the country. Today's numbers, historic as they are a testament to the leadership that you've provided, Mr. President, on mitigation, on recovery, and as you directed the White House Coronavirus Task Force. They're also a tribute to the fact that states across the country, now all 50 states, are reopening our country. Even before we came to the end of the 45 days, you directed us to give guidance to state governors and all the states and territories to safely and responsibly reopen. And now all of our states are in the process of doing that. It's remarkable to think that 2.5 million jobs and declining unemployment number actually dates to surveys done in mid-May. Mr. President, it's remarkable that we can see all across the country that this is a snapshot today of the comeback that was taking place the better part of a month ago. But because of the guidance you gave to the American people in mitigation, and because of the recovery efforts that bipartisan.
And we're not turning back on the economy, and it didn't work. They had to.
We see the Black Lives Matter mural. Yesterday we saw the federal authorities, the administration putting up a...
Get the quote exactly right, but Winston Churchill once said, there is nothing more invigorating than being shot at without effect. And that is the way that Donald Trump seemed today. He has been under heavy fire, first the coronavirus, then the huge job losses, then the racial protests and riots and the steep criticism from some military brass, and then to
free and fair trade. We created more than 7 million jobs. And today, the strength and resilience of the American people is shining through. And this is their day. Congratulations, America. The comeback begins.
And I think very importantly, because it's a great state.
Garden, many are pointing out in social media platforms this morning. But he went on to sit down and sign that bill that extends the deadline for businesses to repay those emergency PPP loans. And that's obviously really important. And Chris, he also had a little teaser there that there would be some news, or an announcement at least, coming on help for restaurants. So taking that all in, him talking about the coronavirus, the vaccine, he had a meeting yesterday. He said some very positive developments are coming on that, tremendous progress on vaccines he talked about. And to Ed's point, you look at the Dow, it is surging. And it went all up all the way through the president's talking there from the Rose Garden, now up nearly 1,000 points. So there seems to be a lot of optimism building based on the report this morning and the words from the president just now.
Yeah, and you know, it is interesting, the PPP, there were a lot of small businesses that said that we...
His head to slam into the ground. The officers were suspended. But this evening there is backlash after every member of the city's emergency response team resigned from the unit in a show of support for those suspended officers. Nearly 2 weeks since Floyd's death, there is still frustration nationwide, with protests continuing tonight. In Washington today, the mayor had Black Lives Matter painted in a street leading to the White House, less than 24 hours before more than 100,000 protesters are expected here tomorrow. Well, as you can tell, there's a lot of news to get to tonight, and our team of correspondents is standing by. CBS's SIOUX is going to lead us off tonight from Minneapolis. Jamie?
Nora, protesters here wanted the city to defund the police department. While that did not happen at today's emergency city council meeting, Minneapolis leaders believe this is the first step to real change.
Demonstrators' demands for change became city policy today. The Minneapolis City Council approved a ban on all police chokeholds and is now requiring police to report and intervene in unauthorized use of force by fellow officers. Minneapolis City Council President Lisa Bender.
Do you feel that this should have happened a long time ago?
Without making excuses, we've tried for many years to revise our use of force policies. It hasn't been enough, and there's no going back.
Today, California's governor banned state police from training officers to use chokeholds.
But at the end of the day, a carotid hold that literally is designed to stop people's blood from flowing into their brain, that has no place any longer. and 21st century practices in policing.
Since George Floyd's death, police departments in at least 10 cities have enacted their own reforms. Starting today, Dallas police now have a duty to intervene policy.
My face is gone.
2 of the 3 former Minneapolis officers charged with aiding and abetting in Floyd's death had little experience on the street. Officer Thomas Lane was on just his 4th day. Alexander King was on only his 3rd street shift. Their attorneys say they were following veteran officer Derek Chauvin's orders. Mayor Jacob Fry, who wept at George Floyd's casket Thursday, today called the new reforms progress.
So we need to seize this moment and channel our collective pain into collective action, and that begins right now.
What's his name?
In addition to Minneapolis's new chokehold measures, use of all crowd control weapons at protests, including tear gas and rubber bullets, must now be authorized only by the chief of police or his designee. On Monday, former officer Derek Chauvin will make his first court appearance. Nora?
Cmgus in Minneapolis, thank you. Now to those growing concerns about violent crackdowns by police against peaceful protesters. In New York City, a food delivery man was arrested after curfew despite being deemed an essential worker during the coronavirus pandemic. CBS's Jerika Duncan is in New York City for us again tonight, where protesters are continuing in the rain. Jerika?
Well, while these protests mainly are about standing up to injustice, it's video of a 75-year-old man in Buffalo getting shoved by police that's getting a lot of attention. A warning, what you're about to see is graphic. This video of a rally in Buffalo, New York yesterday shows 2 emergency response officers shove an elderly 75-year-old man to the ground. As his head bleeds on the sidewalk, the officers continue walking past him. Today, 57 members of the police response team resigned in support of those 2 officers who were suspended without pay, stating they were simply following orders. Last night in New York City, demonstrations were mostly calm, but some pockets turned violent after the curfew. But there are growing questions of aggressive police tactics. Last night, we captured this exchange between an NYPD lieutenant and a protester.
Do you think that physical force is necessary at times?
I want to say no, but obviously it is. You know, you can't have everything, right? You know, people aren't going to listen. You know, we can only let people go so far.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says there will be accountability for excessive use of force.
Disciplinary actions are about to be announced. Some will include suspensions of officers. There's a lot going on.
Another day of protests as calls for justice nationwide are coming together as one. In Washington, D.C., the mayor commissioned a Black Lives Matter mural on the road leading to the White House. Police are expecting up to 200,000 people for a rally in the nation's capital tomorrow. Today, crews worked to fortify the perimeter of the White House. Military personnel were also out on the streets. Tonight, CBS News has learned the crew of the low-flying helicopter that hovered over protesters on Monday has been grounded ahead of tomorrow's protest. That 75-year-old Buffalo man is in serious but stable condition tonight. At an earlier demonstration, it was actually led off by the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Nora, some people in the crowd, some white people, knew the words and sang along.
Jerika Duncan in New York City tonight, thank you. Tonight, President Trump is hailing a surprising drop in the number of Americans looking for work. The Labor Department says the economy added
receives equal treatment in every encounter with law enforcement, regardless of race, color, gender, or creed. They have to receive fair treatment.
But as he paused to sign a bill, he refused to answer questions.
I'd like to sign this bill. This is a very different thing.
What's your plan?
Our country is so strong, and that's what my plan is. We're going to have the strongest economy in the world.
And when it was all over, he again refused to answer questions.
How can it be a great day for George Floyd? How is this a great day for equality?
Joe Biden called the president's words despicable.
George Floyd's last words, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe," have echoed all across this nation and, quite frankly, around the world. For the president to try to put any other words in the mouths of George Floyd, I frankly think is despicable.
John Carl with us tonight from the White House. The past few days, in a rare move, there's been another development, John. As you know, several retired military leaders have now been harshly critical of the president, including his former Defense Secretary, General Mattis, which made big news. But today, news that there were scathing words from his former Chief of Staff as well, General John Kelly.
Former Chief of Staff John Kelly said he agreed entirely with Jim Mattis that the president represents a threat to the Constitution. And then he went a little further. He said, I think we need to look harder at who we elect. What is their character like? What is their ethics? Are they willing, if they're elected, to represent all of their constituents, not just the base? A clear shot at his former boss, David.
All right, Jonathan Carl with us all week long. John, thank you. And at so many of the rallies in this country, they are shouting another name as well, including Breonna Taylor, who would have turned 27 today. Back in March, she was shot 8 times while she slept in her bed in Louisville. The protesters across this country demanding, say her name. Here's Deborah Roberts.
Tonight demands for justice as the FBI investigate Breonna Taylor's killing at the hands of police.
Say her name! Say her name!
Today she would have turned 27, a young EMT who had dreams of becoming a nurse.
Breonna was just full of life. She loved life. She light up a room.
For Courtney Riley, it feels personal. She turns 27 this year, too.
It's really hard. I do see myself in her. Like, people talk about, like, it could be my kids, it could be my brother, it could be me. Like, literally me.
Back in March, 3 plainclothes Louisville police officers stormed Breonna's home, executing a no-knock search warrant. Family lawyers say Breonna's boyfriend, a licensed gun owner, fired a shot, fearing intruders. The officers fired 20 rounds in return, killing Breonna. Those officers have been reassigned but remain on the force. Tonight, activists vowing Breonna's name will not be forgotten.
Breonna Taylor's name now being spoken all over the country, and there's even a petition circulating to press Kentucky authorities to take action on this case. So far, it has nearly 4 million signatures. David?
Deborah Roberts with us tonight as well. Thank you. This is a country, as we've been reporting, with 2 crises at once. In the coronavirus pandemic tonight, the number of cases rising now in at least 18 states, including here in New York City as well. Hospitalizations up sharply after trending down since early April. Tonight, the investigation, are the protests playing a role, and the warning now about bleach and household products being used on food and people. ABC's Steve Osunsami at the CDC in Atlanta.
The forecast from the CDC is sobering tonight. Up to 143,000 total coronavirus deaths in America by the end of this month. Just as things were improving in New York City, there's an alarming jump tonight in the number of people hospitalized with COVID-19. A 75% jump in just one day. And the city's mayor says it's too early to know if it's because of the large crowds at protests in the streets.
I would be surprised if that's what's causing it. I think we're much more likely in the next week, 10 days, to see a manifestation if there is one.
New York State as a whole has turned a corner, reporting 42 deaths on Thursday, its lowest daily number of deaths in 8 weeks. Authorities at the CDC say that they do believe the virus is marching with protesters around the country and could increase infections.
I do think there is a potential, unfortunately, for this to be a seeding event.
In Los Angeles, they're telling protesters to self-quarantine when they get home. 18 states plus Puerto Rico are seeing increases in new cases. In Salt Lake City, where businesses are now open, authorities believe that people getting together on Mother's Day and Memorial Day has led to more people getting sick.
I tell my patients, if your workplace is reopening, it doesn't mean that there's no COVID in your workplace.
There's also this unusual warning from the CDC tonight. A number of Americans afraid of the coronavirus are drinking bleach and using it to clean their skin and food. They say that needs to stop. World health authorities tonight are once again changing their recommendations for face coverings, saying that if they're made of fabric, they need at least 3 pieces of cloth to be effective. David?
Steve Osunsami with the ever-changing news on the pandemic as well. Steve, thank you. And now to the staggering toll in this in Latin America, in Brazil.
Bill had Colin Kaepernick's name should have been mentioned, and it wasn't, because this is the root of a lot of the backlash and why people can't take the NFL seriously when it comes to social justice issues. The person who spoke about it first you abandon them, you blackball them from the league, and now that it feels like the public tide is turning, suddenly you want to be about Black Lives Matter. That is just a lot to take in, and it still looks quite hypocritical as long as Colin Kaepernick doesn't have a job.
Jamel, you stole my question to you. My next question to you was, do you think the NFL, Roger Goodell, should they apologize to Colin Kaepernick and the President of the United States as well?
Well, they have no control over what the president does. I don't think they should hold out for that. By that matter, the president will get an apology, and you too, right? We know that's not happening, okay? So the reality is that the NFL can control their own league. And the other component of this is that we have 32 team owners. A lot of them support Donald Trump. And I just, unfortunately, have a hard time believing that even with Roger Goodell's apology, even with the public tide turning, I just don't see them giving Colin Kaepernick another opportunity. And an apology is one thing, Don, but letting him continue his livelihood is where the end game really is. And as long as they deny opportunity, this means nothing.
I think most people agree with you 100%. Caitlin, you know, we know how the president views players that kneel. I played the soundbite for you of him referring to them as sons of bitches. That position hasn't changed at all, has it?
No, and he made that pretty clear today after Drew Brees apologized for what he had said. The president responded saying that he didn't think Drew Brees should have apologized. He reiterated his stance, and he said in all caps, no kneeling in this tweet. So if we wanted an answer on whether or not the recent events that have happened in the country have changed the president's mind, he's making pretty clear that they haven't. So the question is, you know, where does he go from here? Because remember when all of this was going on and the NFL owners were having that conversation about what to do going forward? Because I should note, 75% of the players in the NFL are black. Most of the owners are white. A lot of them are supporters of the president as well. And when they were having the discussions about what to do, the president played a role in that. And so whenever they came out and said they were going to fine the players who kneeled during the national anthem, Jerry Jones later said that the president was actually telling him, this is good for me, saying that this is a good political issue for him. So the question that's going forward as the president we know is maintaining that same position is, does this remain a good position for him? You know, what happens here? Because Drew Brees is already responding to the president tonight and saying he disagrees with him. And so that's really the question going forward is, does the president continue to see it as a political winner for him, as he made clear he did so many years ago?
What is he saying, Jamel? Drew Brees is responding tonight.
I think Drew Brees, he very much understands that what he said was wrong. People are looking for action, because even after his first apology, that was the question I had. It's fine to say these words, but considering your stance has been pretty consistent on this, it's hard to believe that you suddenly had a change overnight and that it wasn't really based off the public backlash that you received, which is very foreign to Drew Brees, considering he's one of the most beloved players in the league. But now that he's directly addressing the president, that puts a little bit different tone with this, because people wondered where he truly stood, whether or not this was just a fake apology or a real one. And now by taking on the president, Drew Brees is showing that he's kind of willing to get in there and get a little dirty with this issue, particularly since it seems as if him and Donald Trump are particularly friendly, because they've been photographed together at an event, at a game. And so I'm just wondering what the president's response will be to this, and whether or not Drew has really understands that he's not fully engaged in a fight.
I'm just going to read a little bit of it, and I have a follow-up for you. It says, and this is what he posted on his Instagram. We can put that up. He says, through my ongoing conversations with friends, teammates, and leaders in the black community, I realize it is not an issue about the American flag. It has never been. We can no longer use the flag to turn people away or distract them from the real issues that face our black communities. We did this back in 2017, and regretfully, I brought it back with my comments this week. We must stop talking about the flag and shift our attention to real issues of systemic racial injustice, economic oppression, police brutality, and judicial and prison reform. We are at a critical juncture in our nation's history. It is, if not now, then when? And then he goes on and he talks about we as a white community need to listen and learn from the pain and suffering of our black communities. We must acknowledge the problems and identify the solutions, and then put this into action. The black community cannot do it alone. This will require all of us. Is this how people learn?
sometimes as we've seen with other examples, sometimes they have to learn through backlash. I mean, I think we've all been conditioned, be it through entertainment, be it through some examples that we've seen publicly, is that people think that people come to the right side of history just willingly. That's never how it's been. It's always been by force. It's always been by pressure. And Drew Brees is an example of that. And because his reputation means something to him, I think that's why he suddenly is responding so strongly. Now, again, as I said, Don, I initially questioned what was driving him to apologize. Was it more about wanting to save face, or is he really trying to be engaged in a very real fight for inequality, or for equality rather? And by, again, turning this against the president and kind of openly challenging him, that puts Drew Brees in a little bit different position. And I don't have any trouble looking at him as being a little more sincere than maybe I initially thought.
Well, I have to tell you, you know I'm from Louisiana. My mom, on Sundays, even if alone, or if we're just, she dresses up, full makeup and hair, in a Saints jersey with Drew Brees' name on the back, and screams at the television on Sundays, "Breezy, come on, Breezy, let's go." You know what she said to me this week? When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. And she was not having any of it. She has been a Drew Brees fan since he has been with the Saints in Louisiana. And she was not having any of it, even the apology. I don't know how she feels about this particular one, but we'll see. He lost a lot of people with that comment. Thank you both very much. I appreciate it. Is the NFL commissioner's statement a sign of things to come in this country, that it is changing right now? Former NFL player and minority owner of the Atlanta Falcons, Warrick Dunn, speaks out. He is next.
At T. I want to bring in Benjamin Watson, a former NFL player, and I believe he's the author of Under Our Skin, Getting Real About Race and Getting Free from the Fears and Frustrations That Divide Us. Benjamin, I mean, you wrote about this in Under Our Skin. I'm wondering what you make of Roger Goodell's statement.
Well, I think we all have certain reactions, but whether he is sincere or if he's unsincere, I think great good can come from this. And you listen to what he said. We, the NFL, condemn racism and the systematic oppression of black people. The next step, obviously, is to start addressing that within the NFL. And so this is a good thing. This is a great acknowledgement. And I agree that I do think that Roger Goodell cares about these issues. But now when we look internally into the NFL, and we just watched the NFL draft, we saw on our screens where there weren't very many blacks in C-level positions. We know that there aren't many minorities, much less black people in ownership. There's 3 head coaches that are black. How do we address those issues in the NFL? That's where the proof comes. That's where the action comes, is by addressing the nepotism problem that I believe it still exists in the NFL. That's where we can kind of take this statement, great statement, we applaud it, whether it was by the pressure of players, which again, I applaud our players for leading this. Now let's go to the next step in action, and let's see the proof when we look at NFL clubs now moving forward.
And Benjamin, your former teammate Drew Brees obviously had controversy this week when he said that he'd never agree with NFL players who knelt during the national anthem. He's since apologized for saying that. Do you accept that apology?
Of course, of course. I know Drew. There's no secret. I played with Drew for several years. Love him and his family. I think that we have to collectively understand that when someone says something that they didn't mean or something that was misinterpreted and they apologize, we forgive them and we move on. Drew said perfectly in his statement that he was going to, with his actions, prove how he feels. I think the biggest thing, though, is that he said he's going to listen. And that's the same thing you heard Roger Goodell say. I'm going to listen. Look, we live in a country where we can have a multitude of different perspectives. If Drew doesn't agree with people kneeling for the flag, that's fine. What he does have to do, and what we all have to do, is understand the plight of others, understand the pain of others, and be willing to step into their shoes and say, you know what, I may not agree with that, I may not understand that, but because I love you, because I love your humanity, I'm willing to listen to where you're coming from. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, that's what he'll do.
Christine, it's interesting because when this was being discussed, you know, with Colin Kaepernick and others, you know, there were a lot of fans who seemed to not appreciate the idea of players taking a knee. Certainly the president didn't, and it seemed like the pendulum, once games started again and games were being played, it seems like a lot of the owners backtracked as well.
Right. I think things have changed dramatically, and obviously this is far beyond football. Of course, Anderson, this is about our country and what we're seeing and what you're talking about every night on air. And the NFL is a part of our culture, and clearly they are seeing this. And so everything that we thought might have been the case a couple weeks ago is no more. And I can go. I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Well, so I just think that this shows, if anyone is doubting how big a deal this is and the tragedy of George Floyd and all of the issues that we're talking about with Black Lives Matter, if anyone doubts that this is one of the watershed moments in our nation's history, something like a sports league seems insignificant, except it's the NFL, our national pastime. Yeah. And if Goodell is giving us that kind of statement today, which he did, that signals that things have changed dramatically.
I want to bring in Aaron Jones, running back for the Green Bay Packers. Aaron, thanks for being with us. You're in the league right now. How do you think Goodell's message is going to be received by the players, and how is it being received by you?
By me, it's being received well. I'm just glad to see that he's listening, and he came back and knows that he's made a mistake, and he's going to correct himself, and he's open, has open ears to what's in store ahead. So, I mean, I think everybody...
The first clinically proven FDA Something must be done to control prescription drug prices.
Martin Sheen went on a viral rant.
People can't choose between...
You just, I think it was yesterday, and you were talking about how you had racist teammates. Do you wish that this came from Goodell a lot earlier?
Well, Anderson, I wish we weren't dealing with any of this. The truth of the matter is we live in a fallen world. We have sin in our world. It manifests itself many times in a bunch of different things, including racism. And so my wish would be that we wouldn't have any of this going on, but we do. And so, yeah, of course, I wish that not just a statement be made, but I wish that we wouldn't be dealing with the disparities that we're dealing with in our culture, that we wouldn't be dealing with, the years, the 200 years of slavery, the 150 years of Jim Crow, redlining, residential segregation, the list goes on, incarceration. I wish we weren't dealing with any of those things, but here we are. And so the question is, how are we collectively, white, black, rich, poor, how are we going to make this country better? And so that's what this has to be about. This has to be about America looking in the mirror, because what we're seeing right now is a reflection of ourselves, and deciding what we're going to do to make it better.
Aaron, when the season finally does start again and players are on the field, how do you think this changes things?
I'm thinking for the Packers wise, I feel like you don't understand much. Back then we knew what it was about, solidarity. We all knew what it was about. So for us, nothing's really going to change. We're going to continue to go about ourselves the way we do it in the normal day. Because in our facility, we don't see that. It's already been talked about. All of that has been laid down. We don't remember any of those problems. We know we have one common goal.
Aaron Jones, I appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much. Benjamin Watson as well, and Christine Brennan. Aaron, I apologize. We tried to get you on camera, and obviously had some technical issues even with the phone. Really appreciate you coming. Benjamin Watson, great to have you, and Christine, thanks so much. We're going to have a closer look at the policing that we have seen as people protest current policy, current policing. We've seen extraordinary images from the police in a positive way, and also some sickening incidents as well. This in Buffalo. The fact that some officers are now defending the officers involved. We'll be right back.
To go up to Mr. Chauvin and grab him and throw him off, and quote, they're required to call him sir. He has 20 years experience. What is my client supposed to do but follow what the training officer said? Is that aiding and abetting in a crime? Ah yes, the lapdog defense works every time. Now those are the two rookie cops. The third officer who's charged with aiding and abetting, apparently he is cooperating with investigators, which is extraordinary just on the face of it. As the New York Times notes, quote, it is not common for officers to break ranks or cross what is often called the blue wall of silence. And here's something else to look forward to. Officer Derek Chauvin, the one they are trying to say is the only one responsible for George Floyd's murder, Well, he makes his first court appearance on Monday. As Rachel likes to say, watch this space. Joining us now is former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner. He spent 24 years with the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office.
Hard to believe this is happening, but again, the longer you let insanity go unchallenged, and almost none of our leaders are challenging it in case you haven't noticed, the more likely it becomes it'll be real. It'll happen, and you're going to have to live with the consequences. They're telling you that letting criminals invade your home is mandatory, and if you don't like it, you're a racist. That's what I remember the Minneapolis City Council was saying in public. How exactly, by the way, is that demand going to reduce racism? Nothing they're doing reduces racism. It's causing it. Systematically demonizing people for the color of their skin, the way they were born, something they can't change. Does that bring racial harmony? No. They don't care. That's their policy. And they're never going to feel the effects because they have private security. Drive up and down the streets in any rich city. Washington, D.C., I did it today. We have guards on the street, say the signs. Oh, guards you paid for yourself. They'll be fine. You're about to go through a home invasion. Dr. Wilfred Riley is a professor at Kentucky State University, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks so much for coming on. I'm worried that we're not thinking through the consequences of our decisions right now. Are you concerned?
Yeah, the idea of abolishing or greatly defunding any major city police department is absolutely ludicrous. Almost every city would be Dodge City, Kansas. So I do want to say everyone hates police brutality.
Of course.
Almost everyone favors basic measures like body cams. I saw the George Floyd video. I want charges brought against preferably all the officers involved. But we know scientifically what is going to happen if you dramatically pull back policing in urban centers, because we've seen it. We called this the Ferguson effect 4 years ago. Following the riots near St. Louis, there was substantial police pullback, and you started seeing headlines like, from my hometown of Chicago, police stops down 90%, crime skyrockets. This isn't theoretical. From 2014 to 2017, we went from 14,000 odd murders in the United States to 17,294. Substantial, nearly 20% increase. And I want to note, this affects communities of color the most. The majority of those lives lost, if you want to talk about black lives, were African American lives. By the end of that period, black people had moved past the combined white and Hispanic category in terms of the number of murders in our community. Roughly 8,000 to around 6.5K, 6,500. And I think we've already seen what happens to minority communities and to white communities when the police pull back in Minneapolis. If you look at that Lake Street district of the city, that was to a very real extent a black and Asian business community. If you look at the businesses that were looted or that were burnt to the ground, you're talking about Scores Sports Bar. They finally have their GoFundMe up. You're talking about Midori's Floating World Cafe, Plaza Mexico, one of the leading black-serving charter schools. The International Bazaar, I believe, was burnt. These are places I've seen coming from the Midwest. And I will say, I've never in my life seen anything as ludicrous as a heavily Caucasian mob, which is what you did have in Minneapolis and Portland, without excusing any rioters of any other color, burning a successful black man's business while chanting Black Lives Matter. And you're going to get a lot more of that kind of nonsense in a big city with no police. That's a bad idea. So that could be my whole segment.